So my name's Gary Matthewman. I'm here to conduct Mansfield Park, an opera by Jonathan Dove.
Gary, welcome, and
Thank you.
welcome to Backstories. We're so happy to have you here at the IU Jacobs School of Music.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the chamber opera, Mansfield Park, who it's by and what it's about.
It's by a chap called Jonathan Dove, who's a fellow Brit, London-born, and it's a setting of Jane Austen's novel. For many, you could call it her most complex novel. It was anonymously published in 1814, but it didn't bring her any great public fame during her lifetime. She died in 1817, age 41. And the story focuses on Fanny Price, who's a poor, rather timid girl who is brought up initially in a poor household, and then is taken in to live with her very wealthy relatives, her aunt and uncle, and associated relatives at Mansfield Park, their grand stately home in the north of England. And she has to kind of struggle from the off when she arrives at Mansfield Park through this kind of maelstrom of social, gender, kind of emotional, moral, romantic challenges. They come at her thick and fast, and it's a remarkable thing, the way in which in the novel Austen kind of gives us this inside view of what she's going through and how she struggles with all of those things, sometimes many things at once. But we soon learn that she's made of stern stuff, is Fanny Price. She prevails in the end. Yeah.
Let's stick to the novel for a few moments. Of course, Jonathan Dove wrote the music. Alistair Middleton wrote the libretto. How has he transposed the text of the novel to the libretto?
Any librettist worth their salt, for my money, knows precisely what to leave out. And I think that's what he's done absolutely brilliantly. He kind of takes hold of only what's necessary to kind of keep the dramatic and emotional arc of the thing in place, and even actually to the extent of leaving out some of the major characters in the novel. For example, the eldest Bertram's son, he doesn't feature in the opera at all because the story can be told without him being there. So he does that, and then much in the way that I think that the great poets do, he takes each episode from the novel and distills it, and kind of, it seems to me, is asking himself, what are the barest bones that we can kind of portray what goes on in this scene with, and also how can I kind of, A, of course, make them singable, but B, how can I make jokes in a pithy way, in a short enough way that Jonathan Dove can take them and make them into funny moments musically. It's an extraordinary feat. I think he's done a very, very good job.
Jane Austen's comedy of manners comes to mind. That seems to be a theme throughout most of her writing. She's perennially critical of the English gentry. How does Dove represent this theme throughout the score?
There's often a delicious humor in the musical language. So whether it's something harmonic, something rhythmic, something textural, those political cartoons where, not just political actually, any of those caricature cartoons where the artist will grossly exaggerate some physical feature of somebody. He does that with kind of aspects of people's character and turns them into musical jokes often, by just exaggerating some aspect of what they're doing, and often turning them into a kind of running joke that threads throughout the piece as well, which I think is very effective. But that's also not to say that he's only making fun in a light-hearted way like that for laughs. He certainly pulls no punches when it comes to highlighting what I might call, I don't know, that kind of focused nastiness, or that entitled laziness, or that flippant cruelty that was, it's a human trait, but it certainly was then a thing very much in evidence in the higher classes, ruthless. So we get the laughs, but we also get quite a lot of twisting of the knife and things to ponder, things to think about. Yeah.
What do you think is expressed, or how do you think is expressed musically, the emotions and the worldviews of the heroine, Fanny Price?
Fanny Price's music in this opera, I think, in relation to the others, often takes on a seriousness and a kind of inner sincerity. It's extraordinary how he does it. It's because she's in this eternal struggle of always having to wear the societal mask of propriety and kind of making sure everything's as it should be, and that she's behaving as she should be. We still sense an awful lot of what is going on inside Fanny Price through something in the orchestration, or through a sudden change in the texture, or the mood, or the pacing of the word setting, or the harmonic language, or something. It's so Jonathan Dove, it seems to me, is a master of kind of moving swiftly and deftly from one side of the coin to the other, in such a way that you often don't even notice the change, but you suddenly find yourself feeling you're bathing in a different kind of atmosphere when she sings.
The original version of Mansfield Park was premiered with a four-handed piano score. I imagine very appealing to you as a pianist. However, how is the music enhanced now with the 13-piece chamber orchestration?
Well, first I'd like to say that I think if the piano is played with really extraordinary control and finesse of textural voicing and colour and speed of attack, for example, in my view, I think the piano beautifully played like that really can stand up to any orchestration. It can produce interest, and we know that from countless great pianists we've heard across the decades. But surely it has to be admitted that that's a kind of rare thing, right? It's a rare, precious thing to hear that. And in a piece like this, I think the best way I can put this is that he's a master of, even with only 13 instruments, giving each character their own vibe, for want of a better expression. It's something he does right from the off in that opening scene when we get all of the characters. They're there, kind of relating to Fanny Price in one way or other. She's the central figure. The music shifts in a subtle way each time a different person speaks. It's something I've been enjoying working with the orchestra on. So I'm really trying to highlight that from the off. He allows the instrumentation to be a part of the storytelling, never mere oral wallpaper backdrop, which is the case with all good opera composition, of course. But he does it very well with such small forces. Yeah.
How does your work as a collaborative pianist or a song pianist, as I've read, influence your approach to chamber music as a conductor?
I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that my approach to what I'm doing now as a conductor is my work as a collaborative pianist. It's one and the same thing, I think, for me in many ways. I think it's about the human element of what we're doing, and even in art song, before we kind of enter the operatic realm, you have twice the number of human variables that you have in, say, a solo piano work. So for a solo pianist, you have the composer, you have the pianist, and you have your audience as the three kind of elements, if you like, of that human equation. For an art song, you have literally twice that number, because a poet comes along first, crystallizes a human experience. The composer comes along and adds theirs. I come along as a pianist with my view on it to bring to rehearsals. The singer comes along twice, once as themselves and once as the character they're portraying, and then you have the audience as well. And anytime one of those things shifts on its axis, you're in a different universe, subtly so perhaps, but still different. And so in opera, the fact that you then add that another human facet every time you add a director, a set designer, a costume designer, a lighting designer, each of the people singing, each of the players in the orchestra, you're swimming in this endless sea of human possibility, and I think that's really, really thrilling. It's also, I think, linked to the need that collaborative pianists have to be a real ally for singers, to acknowledge that what they're doing is extraordinarily difficult. I always have at the back of my mind, especially in years gone by, when I've heard people flippantly kind of say, "Oh, singers can be so dramatic," and so. And hang on a minute. If my instrument were the size of a 5-pence piece, it was buried within me. I couldn't see it. I wasn't feeling well that day, it might not work as I needed it to. I've got to sing to thousands of people with no microphone, in a hot costume under hot lights. Don't block her light, keep an eye on the beat, remember your perfect text in Italian, French, German, Russian, English, whatever it is. I would be an absolute nightmare. I'm always aware of that, and I think as a collaborative artist, whether pianist or conductor, it's that that desire to allow these people, and I mean singers especially, to do what they do as well as they can do because they feel enabled by working with me and the way I'm trying to kind of foster an atmosphere in the room which is conducive to that. Sorry, is that an awfully rambling answer? I think it's
No, not at all. I get the impression that not only are you a collaborator with the singer, but also their support system and their safety net.
Partly so. I think you'd want that for sure, yeah. And I'll never forget a great conducting teacher I worked with saying to me, don't forget, my dears, to conduct the musicians, not only the music. And so many times in my life I've seen perfectly able conductors, lovely hands, great ears, blah, 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 lose the room because they didn't say the right thing, or they said the wrong thing, or they failed to read somebody's body language and react swiftly and tactfully. And it's such an important part of the job. It's, to that end, I think when I'm conducting, I actually feel, in many ways, the way I'm kind of breathing with singers and the way I'm sensing the music, if you like, it's a very similar thing to me. I just have the business of orchestral conducting technique and all of these, in this case, 13 cars to drive at once to deal with. But beyond that, the similarities are striking.
Yeah. Nicely put. Mansfield Park is most often performed in heritage venues, mansions, things of the like, small theaters. What do you feel are the challenges of mounting this work in a large opera house like the Musical Arts Center or even the Madam Walker in Indianapolis?
I don't know how big the Madam Walker is, so I'm going to talk about the MAC here, okay? I think the challenge here falls principally on the singers, of course, because they have to be ready to sing generously, freely, properly on the body in a way that reaches the ears of every listener in a large auditorium. But I mean, hey, that's what they're training for, right? So in some ways, in my experience, this can actually be a liberating thing for them, being in a bigger space, because I, as conductor, will almost never be asking them to sing softer in terms of volume. I just want them to sing properly all the time. Yeah. And in smaller venues, sometimes they will have people saying, sorry, it's too much. Dear, can you take that down a little? So, and then they start squashing themselves and it becomes kind of tighter. This is a freer communication setup, if you like, I think, a bigger space. I will be asking them to sing softer in terms of color or emotional, approach or whatever, but that's a different thing. I think also there's a challenge for our director, for Michael Schell, in that gesturally everything has to work for people who are further away. I think another thing for the singers, and this relates to all opera as well in a way, I think, because so many fewer people will be able to see detailed facial expression from the singers because they're just further away physically, I'm constantly encouraging them to show us the kind of emotional core of what they're doing in the sound itself, and never allowing themselves to compensate for that in any way by giving us kind of a lively facial communication, which might actually kind of let go of the singing in some way. It's got to be more visceral and from the gut in a bigger space, and I think that's a lovely thing. The only other thing I'd say is, and this never goes away as a challenge for a conductor, is that the age-old problem of achieving a proper balance between the orchestra and the voices. And that has to be dealt with no matter what the venue, no matter what size your force is, what size the voice is. But again, that's linked to, I think, to the collaborative piano playing in many ways, in that if that's my texture as a pianist, or in this case, orchestralist, shall we say, when there's nobody singing, I'm there holding that entire space, making my own decisions about texture based on what I want or feel. When there's a voice, I've got to make sure there's a kind of voice-shaped hole within that texture for the voice to sit in, so they're not fighting against these other things in the same oral region, if you like. And that's a thing that a lot of young orchestral players, it seems it's quite a new idea to them. But when they grasp it and they see that they are then making a huge difference to the successful telling of this story by allowing the singers to actually be heard, but not feeling that they're disengaging or merely accompanying, it's an active process. Then that's a thrilling thing. So, yeah.
Gary, this is your U.S. debut.
As a conductor.
As a conductor?
Yeah, not as a pianist, but as a conductor, yeah.
Have you performed Mansfield Park before?
Nope.
Wonderful.
No, and it was written close to a decade ago, I think, but the chamber orchestration is a relatively new thing, to such an extent that there was no widely available commercial recording for me to listen to, or for any of our cast to listen to. So I had the rare thrill on this project of arriving to the first orchestral rehearsal and hearing the orchestration with my own ears for the first time. Before that, all I could go on was what was in my head when I was looking at the score. Right. You know, so just brilliant, lovely stuff. Yeah,
it's a rare pleasure. Yeah. Well, Gary, you will be performing this work by Jonathan Dove on February 13th and 14th here in Bloomington.
That's right.
At the IU Musical Arts Center. And then the following weekend on the 21st and 22nd at Madam Walker in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Toy, toy, toy. We wish you all the best, and thank you so much for joining us again on Backstories.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.